So with the last of the base game old world factions getting their rework, it's safe to say that one of the things that's in the pipeline that should be heading to us pretty soon is Warhammer 3. So even with the complete lack of information that CA's given us, there's been a ton of speculation about Warhammer 3. There was speculation that it was going to come out this year at, holiday season and game release time, but I don't really think that's going to happen due to the current circumstance of the world. So it looks like we're going to be waiting just a little bit longer. But me personally, I've kind of been thinking, what do I want to see in Warhammer 3? What would make the game better upon Warhammer 2? Because, Warhammer 1, it was a good game, and then Warhammer 2 basically improved upon every single thing, including now the old races. And what can Warhammer 3 do to have that same step up that Warhammer 2 did? So I've collected this list from myself and from the Discord. If you want to join that, link in the description. Shameless plug there. Yes, we compiled this list through basically me asking them a question and then stealing their ideas and expanding upon them a little bit. And I'm just going to go through today what I personally want to see in Warhammer 3 that I think would be very cool. You might not agree with all these, but this is just my personal list. This isn't facts, this isn't what's going to be in, it's just lists. But if you don't want to know what's going to be in Warhammer 3 and any of my guesses turn out to be too right, then you might not want to watch this video. Without further ado, let us get in to the list. As I say with most of my videos like this is no particular order. I don't want any of ththese things more or less than others, they're just in the order that I happen to write them down in. I think the first thing that I mentioned last week was better sieges. Now Warhammer 2 sieges, they're not good. You have one wall, maybe two walls to defend from, and it's very boring, and they only have one tier as well, so that means once you get over the first wall, then you just fight inside the settlement, and there is basically no strategy there. You might as well be fighting on land with a load of stuff in the way. So the way that CA can really fix this is two ways. They can do the big four-sided settlement battles that they do in Three Kingdoms and the other ones, which for the engine it might not be able to cope because that is a lot of stuff to render at once. Or they could do what modders have done and add tiered settlements. So you have front walls and then rear walls and then a final keep to hold back in. You've got lots of tiers to your battle, so you don't have to expend all your troops defending the very outer walls. You can save them when it gets to, the dark days and you need to defend the keep. Modders have already put these types of maps into the game. I'm just going to flash up some footage now from Jackiefish. As you can see, these maps, they look like they could be from the base game themselves, but they are just a little bit more complicated and give you a lot more depth in your battles. Multi-tiered battles bring a lot more strategy, because you have to withhold certain units, thinking, oh no, I need to save these guys for this part of the battle. I don't want to expend them defending my very outer walls that aren't that important. Overall, it just adds a lot more strategy to the game, rather than, just the standard rush meta of get inside the walls and then take the settlement. Also, a thing to kind of tack onto this, which isn't quite a siege, but it kind of is minor settlements. Now, when you don't have a wall on minor settlements, all that happens is the garrison and whatever army's there rush out onto the field to meet the attacking army, and then they fight it, and whoever wins, takes the settlement. Which, I mean, that's fine, but you kind of get bored of, your units just running out into an open field. It's like, your catapult would not see, like, an orc approaching on the distance, like, okay, time to march out into this grassy field to fight them. They'd be like, come on, we need to use, the buildings to our advantage. Something that Three Kingdoms did, and I'm going to bring up Three Kingdoms a lot in this video, because they did add a lot of very interesting things that I would like to see implemented into Warhammer 3, and most Total War games in general, because they're good systems, is, even though it isn't the first game to do it, it's the first game that I really saw do it, and it worked quite well, is whenever you attack, a resource building or a minor settlement, there is still something to attack. You're not just out in an open field. It's not fully walled off. There's maybe a couple of walls and, an inner last control point that you have to defend. But for the most part, it's just kind of an open-ish map with a village in the center. And I really like that. It's a really fun idea of, it brings a little bit more strategy. So, okay, I'm going to hide my elite units behind these buildings. Then when they charge in, okay, I'm going to bring them out. I'm going to slaughter them. It'll be great. What you can do to add something for the attackers to do is what they did in Thrones of Britannia, I believe. And what I believe you can also do in Three Kingdoms is burn down enemy buildings. So, if you are attacking a settlement and you're thinking, okay, I'm not going to win this, but I want to cripple them, you can start shooting at the buildings, burn them down with flaming arrows and all sorts, and that will, damage the building on the campaign map, which is a useful thing to do even if you're not going to win the battle. So what this gets us is something fun for the defenders to do, and something that gives them a little bit more of an advantage, and then something for the attackers to do that, while it doesn't give them the advantage in battle, it can, make it so that the defense is dearly cost for getting that victory. Moving on to the Chaos rework. Now, yes, I've mentioned this in like 3 videos now. I don't like how the Chaos works. It's very boring. I don't like the invasion, but I'm going to come back to that in a little minute. Chaos in general, the Warriors of Chaos, they're pretty bad. They've not really got any interesting mechanics. They have that thing, where they can attack a settlement and then, dominate them, and then they become their vassal. But it's not really that interesting. It's pretty boring. And they've basically been untouched since Game 1. And if we know anything about Game 1, it's that the Game 1 meta, compared to the Game 2 meta, it's trash. You don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Again, this is something that we are fairly confident we're going to get in Game 3, just because Chaos is one of the last, well, it's not races, but, you know, it's one of the last things that they haven't really expanded on in Warhammer and Warhammer 2. So we can be pretty sure that we're going to get something in Game 3. Now, my personal idea, what I would quite like to see for this, is something quite similar to the Nakai campaign or the Norscan campaign, where, you know, you take a settlement and instead of just raising it to the ground, you know, you erect a shrine for a certain Chaos Lord. So we have, you know, the 4 main ones. We have Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh. So if you make a shrine for Khorne, you know, he's the Chaos God of Violence. This is from a very vague Google search, by the way. He's the Chaos God of Violence, so, you know, he can upgrade your melee units in your front lines, and maybe to, you know, appease him, you have to get a bunch of kills. Each of these gods can also give you their unique mission. So, you know, if you make a shrine to Khorne, then he can be like, yo, kill like 10,000 people for me, and I'll give you something. I'll give you a unique unit. That'd be pretty cool. If you do a shrine for Tzeentch, he could give you something to do with magic. If you do one for Nurgle, he could give you a plague type unit, or maybe even give you a similar plague mechanic to what the rats have. And, you know, if you go for Slaanesh and make a shrine to her, then she could give you the password to get through Safe Search. What I'm basically trying to say is there's a lot of potential here, because the Chaos Gods are very deep, and there's lots of rich lore that they could tap into to bring some interesting mechanics. So I really hope they capitalise on that. Now, I think something that basically everyone is excited for, and it's possibly the most exciting thing coming with Game 3, is Mortal Empires 2.0. Now, what this basically means is we're going to get the current Mortal Empires map, and then everything that we get in Game 3, smush that together into, you know, the giga map of every single Warhammer race that they are ever going to add in this trilogy. We're going to have everything, and that is incredibly exciting. Now, if you all remember, go back a couple of years to when Mortal Empires first launched. It's a little bit of a mess. You know, the balancing, it's still pretty awful, and it was poorly optimized. The turns would take forever. So I get the feeling that if we get this pretty soon to launch, then we're going to be facing the same problems of extremely long wait times at the end turn, and probably a heinous imbalance. Probably towards the good guys, because, you know, that's what they like to do. So they have two options. They can either release it like this, like they did with Mortal Empires 1, and we'll just have to deal with it, which is probably what they'll do, or they can hold it in development a little bit longer until they, you know, iron out all the kinks and make it, you know, nice and smooth and quick like the current one. Now, again, this is another thing that we already know is coming, because CA have mentioned it themselves, but I just hope it's something that they put a lot of work and time into, rather than, you know, just thinking, oh crap, we've finished Warhammer 3, now we need to make the Mortal Empires 2.0, just slap it over there and then it's done. But me personally, I have some faith in CA at this point. I'm pretty sure they can pull it off. So best of luck to you guys. Can't wait to see it. Now, just come back to the Chaos Invasion, because that is technically a thing to do with Mortal Empires. I think they should just completely rework this into something that's a bit more interesting, or just scrap it and go for a new mechanic altogether. Now, personally, something that I quite like is in 3 Kingdoms, when you get towards the end of your campaign, each of the, you know, the strongest 3 kingdoms will, you know, declare themselves as the rightful emperor to the throne or whatever, and then they have to duke out to who wins. I haven't really played it that much, okay? I'm paraphrasing. Now, this brings a lot more diplomatic strategy to the game, because not only do you have to, you know, be the most powerful ruler in the world, you also have to have the most allies, so that they can, you know, bump you up, and everyone's like, you know, I support his claim to be emperor. This would be a very interesting thing to see in Warhammer, but I'm not sure exactly how it would work, because I can't really see a lizard man being like, you know what, this rat, as much as I hate rats, you know, he's pretty strong, so I think I'm going to be his ally and support him for the Emperor of the World. You won't really see that happening too often. But they could do a similar mechanic, you know, the Council of 13 for the Skaven, and then, you know, the equivalent ones for each of the other races. You know, they're like, okay, we support this specific Skaven's right to be the powerfulest, and then do the same for, you know, all the different races, powerfulest. That's not a word, just glaze over that. But yes, do this for all the different races, and then, you know, you have a big duke out of the most powerful High Elves, Dark Elves, Empire, Dwarves, everyone. That sounds pretty cool to me. Of course, if you're the player and, you know, you're not quite the most powerful when it gets to this point, and then they choose someone else apart from you to lead your faction, you're not just going to kick you out, because, you know, Mortal Empires is a sandbox, so they want you to be able to experiment until the very end. So they could just add something where it's like, if you are not the most powerful, you can either support them and end your campaign there as a choice, or you can choose to challenge them, which would continue your campaign, and you'd have to beat them to become the most powerful and completely eradicate them, which would be very challenging but very rewarding if you manage to pull it off. But yes, this is a mechanic that I think would be very interesting, and I would quite like to see something along the lines of this. Now, of course, one of the main things that we all want for Game 3 is more unique races. I love every time we get a new race pack, because it just means, you know, more diversity, not just for me playing, but for me playing against, and it's always interesting, and CA always pulls it out of the bag with some weird and wacky guys. Apart from Wood Elves and Beastmen, but, you know, we're going to come back to those eventually. Come on, CA, I'm begging, they need it. So I've just rattled down a couple of races that we haven't seen yet. We have Nippon, which are kind of like Japanese samurai warriors. They look very cool. The Amazons, which would spawn in Lustria, so... But, you know, there'd be a race of warrior women, which I think would be very cool, because we don't really have that many women in the game, so having an entire race of, you know, strong Amazonian women just slashing everyone with tribal spears and stuff. That'd be really cool. I would love to see that. Of course, we know we're going to get something along the lines of Chaos Dwarves and more diverse chaos, as I mentioned before. Kislev, we've just seen the bear cav, so that'd be pretty awesome to see, you know, your guys ran into battle on a massive bear and just absolutely tearing the enemies up. Pygmies are kind of like a tribal voodoo characters, but they're a little bit risque, so we're just going to move straight past that. Now, troglodytes and zotes are races that are kind of like lizard men, but they haven't really quite been added yet, so that could be added in a new Lord pack. You know, add these guys, they'd be very cool. Very interesting additions to the roster if it wasn't for the fact that the lizard men already have like 6 lords already. And finally, halflings, which are kind of like a mix between a dwarf and a human. They're known to be sneaky and are good skirmishers, excellent ranged fighting, but in melee they're kind of atrocious because, you know, they're not as tough as a dwarf and they're not as speedy and agile as a human. They're just kind of, it's kind of stuck in the middle, not too great. But they do have one thing that could absolutely dominate the battlefield. Poultry swarms. That's right, swarms of chickens attacking your enemy. Need I say any more? As I said, getting more races, it's not just good for the people that buy them and play as them, it's good for the people that play against them, adds more variety, and of course, it also gives me more videos to make so I can add a third extension to my mansion. Now, another thing Three Kingdoms did, it added 2 game modes on the same map. You can either play Romance or you can play Records. Romance was, you know, the romance of the Three Kingdoms with all the heroes and the duelings, and the lords were like immortal gods that could just slaughter entire, you know, ranks of infantry. Whereas in Records, it was kind of like the more traditional historic Total War, where, you know, your lord is a guy with some bodyguards, and, you know, he can charge about and do basically about as good as a normal unit can. Now, I'm not saying we should do this for Warhammer because the lords, they need to be powerful because that's who they are, and Warhammer's more of a fantasy universe, so having them, you know, get killed in one shot by a lucky arrow, that'd be incredibly disappointing. So you could go for the romance mode, you know, where your lords are ridiculously powerful and they lead your faction, they can just slaughter ranks upon ranks of enemies, and they can maybe do the duels. Again, the duel mechanic, it's not too amazing, so you'd have to make kind of a call on that whether you want it in or not. But I think having it there as a choice is always good. And if you chose Records, it couldn't be like a historical game, but it could be kind of more close to what we have now, with the lords being a little bit weaker, just, you know, there's a bit of a difference between the two. Now, this is the most risque of the ideas I've had, but I think it could add some depth and some variation to your playthroughs. You know, you can play the same campaign twice and have a totally different experience. And finally, the last thing I want in Three Kingdoms is better diplomacy, and what I basically mean is a better diplomacy screen, because the one we have in Warhammer and Warhammer 2, it's not bad, but it's not really great. If we look at Three Kingdoms, again, I'm referencing it a lot because it has a lot of good stuff. We can actually see the odds of success rather than saying, oh, you have a moderate success with this, yeah, you have a low chance, and then you just have no idea, you just have to guess. When you are bartering in Three Kingdoms, you can see, okay, so this is slightly in my favour, slightly in his favour, yeah, I think he's probably going to take this, and then you propose it, and oh, what do you know, he probably did take it. Another thing that's really great is when you are adding or taking money from someone, you don't have to go into a menu, you go click, 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 back, see what the odds are, click, 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 back, see what the odds are, do this 30 times until you get the right amount. You can actually just go click, click, oh, the odds of this, oh, click, oh, no, too much, bit more, bit less, you know, you can do it within the same menu, and again, you can see the odds so you know how far you can push it. It's just an amazing system. And finally, it would look cool as hell to have the massive portraits, as you can see in Three Kingdoms, but of the cool Warhammer guys. It'd give the CA art team a load of stuff to do. It'd be amazing. Get some good use to that concept art. I'd love to see it. But yes, I believe that is everything that I could think of that I want in Warhammer 3. This is my personal wish list. If you have something that you wish to add, then be sure to leave it in the comments down below. I'm sure to give it a read. I'm very excited for Warhammer 3 whenever it does come out. But come on, say I've been waiting years. We need this. If you didn't like any of my ideas, be sure to leave it a dislike, leave a comment, tell me how awful they are. I'd really appreciate that. If you want to see more Total War Warhammer 2 content, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification. We have the Dark Elf race guide starting this Friday for the next 3 weeks. So it's campaign, then battle and units, and then lords and heroes. So be sure to subscribe if you want to see that. Then after that, I believe it's the Warriors of Chaos, so that's not going to be too fun unless the poll changes very quickly. But yes, for now, I was damned as Colonel, and I'll see you turn next.